All right, Andre, we're live here with you. I'm Steven. This is Andre Norman, back with you again for another installment of how to have difficult conversations about race. And I am really grateful again that you're sharing your wisdom with us, that you're here with us, sharing your time. Very much appreciate it. And we got some good traction last week. Many hundreds of views of the video, and I haven't even fully gotten together the sort of promotion and distribution that I want on that yet. But I've got everything lined up for that going forward. It should go a lot smoother.
Okay, we're getting there. I mean, the
Yeah.
most important thing is the information. As
Yeah,
long as we record it, it'll be there when they get it.
exactly. Yeah. So how's your week been? What is feeling fresh for you these days? What have you been thinking about?
My week has been talking to white people about race.
It's what it looks like.
That's been my week. And between that, I go to the prison every day
Yeah.
still. And the other thing I got to do this week is my son, who's 14. Right now, I'm now doing business coaching with my own son.
Ah,
So 3 times a week, we do a half-hour call. No dad, son. No, did you clean your room? Strictly business.
yeah. Oh, that's
Going
special.
over all the wonderful stuff that I've learned, that I've known, that I've practiced, starting him from the beginning of understanding his, hold on. Well, this is just his stuff, but helping him build out his profile, his understanding his networks, his parents' networks, how that interplays with him.
Hmm.
So he's like, his mom has a big network. I have a big network. So I did the Wikipedia for all my networks and all of her networks. I'm like, you need to understand what you have access to.
Yeah, that is invaluable, and it sounds like you're really helping set him up for
So
success.
we did two. The cool thing is, for those half hours, it's strictly business. I
Yeah.
told him I would not cross it over and scream on him about his room or anything. So that's been my new thing this week, and I'm happy about that.
Oh, that's cool. That's great.
New
And
entrepreneurs.
yeah, yeah, that's it's running in the family. And so in your conversations, you've been talking with a lot of white people, helping advance the conversations and cause of racial justice. What messages have you been working with or trying to share most this week?
Hold on. I have a whiteboard full of them now.
Oh, wow.
So we're getting to the point of defining Black Lives Matter,
Mm,
because I got a lot of people not fully understanding that. Understanding like the protesting, why they protest, what's up with these, why people having violent protests or looting. And again, most of the stuff is historical if you choose to look at it. And if you don't choose to look at it, you won't. You will see it for what you want to see. You can try to find a way to make this justifiable or to make this unjustifiable. And both of those are wrong.
mm.
Let's just make it what it is. See, when you try to make it something, then you have a personal agenda. And we're not dealing with what is. And so I'm helping friends, both white and Black, just deal with what is. And a lot of my Black friends don't want to accept that our voice doesn't carry.
Mm,
They don't like that. They want to be, it's 2020, we've had a Black president, we got congressmen, senators, we own this, we own that. Why does my voice not matter? Well, if your voice mattered, I'd tell them we wouldn't have this problem.
mm,
So let's just go with the facts.
mm.
Oh, well, we need to make more noise. No, you don't need to make more noise. You need people that they listen to make more noise.
Yeah,
So
so you're pointing to sort of the difference in the voice that's listened to in society, and trying to help the voices that are sort of privileged with more access and political power to carry these messages as well.
yeah, and I'm being mindful. I mean, I'm not trying to lean left or right, but I was speaking yesterday, and it was like, hey, tell me about your childhood. And I told them, and I said this story 1,000 times. If you've ever heard my life story speech,
Yeah.
I was on the bus when I was a kid, and people threw rocks at me and called me names because I was Black. And I never correlated that until the other day. Like, wait a minute. When Black kids wanted to go to school to learn, white people protested.
Yeah.
They not only protested, they stood outside and threw rocks at us.
Hmm.
And then when we wanted to eat at the Walmart, not Walmart, the Woolworth counter, they protested and they beat those people up.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hold up. Well, I wasn't even thinking that violent protest was, I mean, I just been focusing on right now. I'm like, hold up. White folks understand violent protest when it's in their interest.
Mm-hmm.
There was no mass outcry for beating up black kids who are trying to go to white schools.
Oh,
There
yeah.
was no mass outcry for white people beating up the people who sat at the Woolworth counter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when white folks get mad, they can be violent. They can have violent protest. So the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was a black thriving city, was fine until white people got mad and they wanted to protest it. Rosewood, Florida, great city until people wanted to protest it.
Yeah. In case people haven't heard of Tulsa, that happened in 1921. Do you want to share that story?
I mean, it was just, there's multiple variations, but the baseline is blacks were free. They went into Tulsa and they built up their section of town. They all worked together. They collaborated. They shared. They did the we're all in this together thing. And they built up businesses. They built up houses. They had economy. Everything was running great.
Yeah, very
It
successful.
was very successful. And there were some white people who lived not nearby, and they weren't doing as good. Then there was this one little encounter, maybe by chance, where one black person assaulted, or insulted, or somebody felt insulted, whatever the exact thing was. So the result or the response to being insulted or whatever the differences was burn down the whole town and kill all the black people you can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they burnt the entire town to the ground and they killed all the black people they could in response to something that was not an atomic bomb that hit their side of town.
No, not at all.
That was their variation of a protest. And when you go back to the Klan and you go back to the Night Riders, you go back to a lot of stuff, when white people had problems with black people and they protested, have you ever seen pictures of a lynching?
Yes.
That's a protest.
Yeah.
And that's an extremely violent protest.
Yeah.
It's part of our history. You go look up any of the lynching, you will see seas and seas of white people and one or two black people hanging from a tree.
Mm-hmm.
I call that a violent protest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
there's no up in arms about that. Now black folks are upset and they're up in arms. It's like, oh my God, why are they using violent protests? Why are they looting? Why are they not being peaceful? Well, none of the protests that were done, or not all of the protests done or led by white folks, were peaceful. So it's like you got selective. I had selective amnesia. Some white folks have definitely selective amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't fit the narrative. Why are you talking about when we used to lynch you? Why are you talking about when we burnt down that one town or that two towns? I mean, you can go down a list of people. Emmett Till was a violent protest. Mm-hmm. He offended a white woman. So they protested and they beat him to death. That was a protest. Mm-hmm. It was an extreme violent protest. And instead of looting for a TV or radio, you took somebody's life. So those folks who were in these spaces all of a sudden have amnesia. And I started sitting around because I've been talking about this more and more. My grandfather, not my great-grandfather, not my great-great-grand, my father's father was born in 1905. My grandfather was born in 05, which means he was alive during the Tulsa. Mm-hmm. He was alive during a lot of this stuff. So I'm not even going back 30 generations ago. My grandfather was born in 1905, which means he was alive for Tulsa. He was alive for Marcus Garvey. He was alive for lynching. He was alive for a lot of this stuff that happened. So we're not going back 3,000 years to when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. I'm talking about when my grandfather walked the earth. Yeah. It was bad.
Yeah.
People want to seem like it was like years and centuries and like back when Jesus was born or something. No.
Oh, no.
One generation removed.
Yeah. And I mean, these things, this is very present, recent history. Our lifetimes and our parents' lifetimes, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, with the introduction of war on drugs and mass incarceration. I saw a chart today that kind of blew my mind about the rate of incarceration, clear back 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And then in the 90s, it goes from around 200,000 in state and federal prisons up to the millions. You're in 1.2, 1.4 million. And that's the result of specific policies that targeted Black people and, were targeting drug usage that they knew specific types of drug usage that were
Specific types
disproportionate
of drug usage.
in the Black community, even if the same drugs were being used in the white community that weren't being prosecuted in the same way.
In the 70s and 80s, heroin was the worst drug known to man. If you sold or used heroin, you were evil.
Mhm.
Because in the time, you know who sold and used heroin in the
Mhm.
majority? Black folks. Now here we are in 2020s,
Mhm.
white kids using heroin. Oh my God, it's a health crisis.
Yeah, we need a recovery
We-
program.
we
We need
need-
public health.
Right now, in some communities, if you're white, you can walk into the police station with a bag of dope in your hand and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
They will take the dope, throw it away, and get you to a treatment center. You do that in Harlem, they're gonna beat your head and throw you in the cell and call you stupid for showing up. So it's, again, I'm not trying to say white kids don't need help or drug addicts don't need help.
Yeah.
That kid should get help, but we should get help too. I don't want to take his help away. Can we get the same kind of help?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
Can we
when
get
we're
the same
talking
kind
about
of help?
equality. Yeah.
That's the equality argument.
Now, I read something fascinating about Tulsa, and it's probably interest of you from the entrepreneurship side. I'll put the link along with this video, but it was a economic analysis of patents and inventions made by Black people throughout American history.
Right.
And at various, I don't know if you happen to see that, but from what I saw, they tracked inventions, contributions to the success of the country, success of industry, economic viability, and there's been different. The number of patents achieved and filed by Black people over time has gone up and down. But the Tulsa riots in particular, following Tulsa, there was a precipitous drop, not just from Tulsa itself, but from around the country, because Black people got the message that if they were successful and if they, achieved too much, invented something, they weren't going to be protected. Their property, their rights, what they invented, their success was not something that was going to be protected or upheld in this country. And the resulting economic impact on the United States is in the millions and billions of dollars. So I'll put that in there. And I thought you might be interested in that from the entrepreneurship side of things.
Definitely, there's that. And then you can just go to the music.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people in music. I don't want to put anybody's favorite artist under the bus that stole or borrowed a lot of Black music.
Oh yeah, I mean,
all
Elvis
day.
Presley to start with.
Yeah, Elvis is the guy, but he's one of the guys. But Black folks would make a song, then white folks would just take it.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing by law that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
They just take your song and say thank you.
Yeah.
You're like, how does that work? You're Black. That's what we do. We
Right.
can take your music.
Yeah, it sounds good. As a white
appreciate
person,
you.
you can be successful with it. You can, take it to mass market and you just do it and you leave behind the inventor of that.
Now, for the record, I love New Kids on the Block.
Mhm.
I love New Kids on the Block. New Edition came out of Boston and did their thing. And their manager or agent, Maurice Starr, went and found New Kids. New Kids had their own music. New Kids didn't, they took the concept, which was completely legal, but they didn't steal anybody's music,
Mhm.
unlike a lot of folks from the 60s and the 50s and the 70s. So the New Kids on the Block, love them.
Mhm.
I mean, I play their music because they're from Boston. So I'm from Boston, so I cheer for them. And Marky Mark too, you know what I'm saying, in the Funky Bunch. But it was theirs. It was theirs. Nobody owns a style, but
Mhm.
people own lyrics. Melodies and lyrics you can own.
Mhm.
A style you can't. So the boy band craze, nobody owns a boy band. So
Yeah.
Temptations, Funkadelics, whoever. But New Edition gave us New Kids, and New Kids were legit.
Yeah.
Backstage Boys legit. All those people were legit because they were singing their own music that is took to a style which is completely open for everybody.
Yeah. But yeah, it's absolutely true that the roots of rock and roll go back to blues, and the roots of blues go back to songs that were sung on plantations. The beats, the chords, the melodies, the progressions. Musically, you can do that analysis, and it's a straight line from yeah.
Except if you want to wear bad glasses, you want to wear crooked glasses, you can. It's not to take away Elvis was gifted.
Yeah.
I don't care if you stole the music, you still need to be gifted. So he had talent. He just borrowed the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was par for the course, and that's why we're having these conversations is to make sure people understand, how much of, our current situation is rooted in things that have been happening, for since the birth of this country and well before its independence. And continuing up through the 1900s and into the 2000s. So it's not like this moment came out of nowhere. It's been
How,
going on for a long time.
how's this sound? The Americans were here. No taxation without representation.
Hmm.
Protest.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're taking our money, but we don't get any protections.
Hmm.
We have to pay you, and you're not even here really watching over us. You're just an occupying force. That's all you are, is an occupying force in our neighborhoods and in our cities. Then the no taxation or representation. We can do Paul Reserve, one if by land, two if by sea. The Redcoats don't shoot this. Oh yeah, I do history. Battle of Lexington. We can do Crispus Attucks, the first man who died, who happened to be black in the
Yeah.
war. But the baseline is no taxation without representation. You're an occupying force, Britain. Go home.
Hmm. Yeah, we had a whole war over it, and that everybody seems fine with that.
Oh, it was fine. You couldn't be. The Americans were being oppressed by the British, economically, everything else you want across the board, and they didn't like it.
Yeah.
And they fought back.
Hmm.
Fast forward, now blacks are being oppressed by Americans, and why would you want to fight back?
Hmm.
Why
Yeah.
would you just accept it?
Yeah, it's you could understand it if you're willing to look. If you could just, with humility, with honesty, just take a look and see what's going on. Read what you need to read. Some of the things that we're sharing and that I'll be linking. The trends are very clear, I think.
But the key
Um,
thing is,
mhm.
even though history hasn't been kind and history hasn't been fair, we're at a place now where we can fix some of that.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want 40 acres to mule. I just want better schools in the city.
Hmm.
I just want taxation and representation to coincide.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't want 4% of the population to represent 40% of the prison population. I'm saying I just want the laws that are applied in the suburbs to apply in the city.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
The laws and the ways in which they're enforced, the patterns of policing, the police presence, it makes a huge difference. The strategy and the philosophy of how those police are distributed and what they're looking for and who they're looking for.
right. I mean, so it's a philosophy. And you have some teams that are just trying to win. Some people show up to make money. But my thing is, I want to talk about solutions.
Yeah.
I can point to 1,000,001 times where stuff went bad and it wasn't fair. We kind of have that analogy or that narrative. So what do we need to discuss to make this better?
Hmm.
Because everybody in the country can talk about what's wrong. Everybody can pull up this little tiny point or that point, or when this time this guy got slighted or that guy got slighted or she got this happened, that happened. How do we fix it?
Hmm.
How do we get folks like us to communicate? So you've been doing this call. It's our third call.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you
Second
learning?
broadcast. Yeah.
What are you learning?
I'm learning, well, I've been learning a lot from you, and I've been learning a lot from everything else I've been reading too, books, articles, things online. Just it, what I've been learning is a deeper understanding, not experiential, but something visceral, inside, where it's suddenly become a lot clearer what it, what is going on racially in this country, and the setup that brought us to this current point. It's just becoming so much clearer why everybody, is so infuriated. Some people are so infuriated at this moment. Because they have been, and they have been for decades and centuries, and we still haven't fixed much of the things. We've made bits of progress over time, legislation here, or changes in policies and procedures here and there, but there's still a vast bit of the pie left to fix. And I've been learning that I think it's important for white people to stop being so afraid of speaking out about this, and to do what they can to find parts of this movement that feel in integrity with them and who they are and what they can do, and to work on those parts of it, with themselves and with their friends and their neighbors and their colleagues. And so that's why I'm doing this with you, is to try to help reach more of those people. especially the people on the fence and people kind of like, I don't really know about this. I don't know what to do. I, maybe have criticisms of the movement or something like that. So
Well,
that's what I want to do.
what I've been explaining about Black Lives Matter, the movement.
Yeah. Let's talk about that movement. What does it mean?
Black Lives Matter, the movement. They're like, well, why? There's a lot of components of the movement people don't like. And I'll tell you, there's some components of the movement that I don't sign on to. So we have looters, we have protesters, we have violent protesters. So I don't subscribe to the looters and the violent protesters. I subscribe to the peaceful protests. I subscribe to people being angry, fiery speeches from the soapbox or from the pulpit on a corner with a bullhorn all day long. I don't subscribe to beating people, gassing people, tear gassing people, dogs on people, rocks in windows, flipping cars, setting stuff on fire. None of that. So why is this one movement got 500 different avenues? And this is what white folks need to understand. Throughout history, Black men or just Black leaders have stood up in the name of Black people. So we'll just take the most famous, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
He said, we need civil rights, not equal rights, just civil rights. And we should have civil rights, and he championed that cause. And what did he get for it?
Killed.
A bullet in the head. And it was real clear he had to die. Now let's take Medgar Evers, who was trying to bring out change as well. And what did he get? Shot in his front yard. Malcolm X wanted guys coming out of prison to stop doing drugs, to stop committing violent acts, and to become honorable, respectable husbands and wives, and husbands and family members. What did he get? He got a bullet or two in his chest in front of his wife and kids. So we can go down the list. If you become a Black leader of Black people attempting to change the narrative, you get shot. So after like 20 or so people getting murdered or assassinated, or whatever you want to call it, we figured out you don't want a Black leader because all you're going to do is get shot. And that thus kills the movement. So Black Lives Matter is created or structured in a way where there is no one leader. There is no lead person. If you shot this one person, the movement goes. That doesn't work with Black Lives Matter. So you have a multitude of people who do their own thing under one banner, which you don't always get everything you agree with, but the one thing you don't get is shot dead. That's the one thing you don't get. In the 70s, there was a program with the feds called COINTELPRO, where they saw any group that they thought was Black and over the top, and they attacked them. So let's take the Black Panthers. It was Black people who legally carried rifles and showed up to do police watches or neighborhood watches. I've never seen the white militias attacked by the feds. Now, they had their standoffs, they had their issues, but 20 Black people with machine guns was a problem. 20 white guys in the hills of Montana with machine guns is okay. As long as you don't start getting explosives, they're cool with you. But the sight of Black men in Black leather jackets, in Black berets, carrying guns, didn't play well on national media. And they became public enemy number one, and they got dismantled and taken down. And murdered. Fred Hampton was murdered in his bed while he was sleeping because he was a Black Panther. And Black Panthers were deemed a threat. So Black Lives Matter and Black people of this generation have finally figured out nobody wants to be the leader of any Black movement because it comes with an historical context. You die, and you die violently. So that's why, but the back end of that is we have to put up with some factions or sections of the movement that we don't all agree with. Because once it becomes one centralized thing with one centralized voice, then you end up with one centralized leader, and he ends up in casket. So that's how that works.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that.
That's how it's been working.
Do you mind if I share a quote right now that's kind of related to that? So, yeah, I really liked this one. This comes from the book So You Want to Talk About Race. And yeah, so this is kind of related to the fractiousness of the movement. There's so many different parts, so many different tactics and strategies. And, I think what I'm hoping is that people will not look at a single person or group, or a single tactic that's being used in this fight and use that as reason enough to reject the entire movement. So that's what this quote in that context. So the author writes, find areas of the movement for equality with which you feel confident that the main goal is equality and within which you do not feel that you're violating your principles. Do work there, and where that work coincides with the work of others, join hands. Remember, this isn't about you. We're sort of addressing white people. This isn't about you, and it isn't about the person in the movement that you do not like. Work will be and constantly is done within movements to make them more effective. Critique already exists from within, rest assured. Movements grow and change. Do not think that there is a complaint against a member of the racial justice movement that you could lodge that is not already being debated. But know that if you are a privileged person trying to impose your wishes on social justice movements, you are trying to remake the movement in your image, which is exactly what the social justice movements are fighting against.
I agree. And you're always going to have people / white folks who say, or even black folks. I heard Morgan Freeman made a comment that racism doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know Andrew?
Andrew Zimmerman, hello.
Okay. Hi, Andrew.
I think he joined us on accident, maybe, but maybe he's chiming in for fun. Let's see. We're actually putting together a tool with BJ Fogg and the behavior design stuff on.
Okay, he's one of your guys.
Racial justice action, yeah.
Okay, well, Morgan Freeman made a comment that racism doesn't exist. There's some other folks who say other stuff. White folks say different stuff. Everybody has their opinion, and they're entitled to their opinion. When Morgan Freeman says racism doesn't exist, I'm fine with that. When there's a black person says, I don't agree with the movement, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. When a white person says, I don't like the way they do this or do that, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. But what I'm going to ask of all those people who disagree, whichever point they disagree with, please give me a better solution. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can tell you the problem. The problem is black people are dying. Mm-hmm. The problem of black people being discriminated against, we go down the line. So since you don't like the Black Lives Matter movement, or you don't agree with the way racism is being projected, give me the solution, give me your answer, and I will take it to the masses.
Mm-hmm. And
but just don't tell me you don't like it.
Mm-hmm. And don't just give a solution, don't just sit there and talk about it, but actually enact that solution.
No, I'll take it. Just tell me what it is. Let's have a discussion about what your solution is.
That's good. You're very inviting.
Let's listen. If there's any people out there, white, black, or Spanish, or Asian, who don't like anything about the movement, I'm cool with that. Give me your alternative solution to what's already happening. Mm-hmm. So when I tell, like the Nancy Reagan thing, the biggest problem would just say no to drugs. It will say yes to what? What do I say? Drugs are all around me. Just say no makes sense practically, but not logically. Because what am I saying yes to? So had Nancy, it was a great slogan, just say no, cool. Now, what am I saying yes to? You have a gym for me? You got a basketball league? You got a chess club? What am I saying yes to? Because I'm surrounded by drugs. Yeah, so when the people are saying now that they don't like a particular part, hey, if you can prove your point, I accept your point. Now, let's use the time to create another avenue. But don't do that, but do this. Give me the do this part. Then we can have that discussion. Then we can get it to the movement.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can bring it. So we're closing in on our time here. There's plenty more we'll get to next week when we talk again. But anything else you want to leave us with for today? Anything you want me to include along with this video if you've been researching or looking at different solutions this past week or anything like that?
We're gonna go old school American. For all the people who are listening or gonna watch or tune in and want to share this. And if you can't agree on anything, we can agree on this country is a great place to live. And this country is a democracy. And this country is predicated on the voice of the people. And the voice of the people in this country is generally heard through voting. Voting is a vehicle in which the voice of the people are heard. And right now, there's a large percentage of our country who are not allowed to vote because they've been incarcerated, or they don't have the proper ID. So if you don't have this type of ID or that type of ID, or if you owe some money on your driver's license, you owe a tax, you owe some kind of parking ticket, we're going to take your right to vote. I don't think anybody in America can draw a line to me and explain why I got arrested for smoking weed or even selling weed at 18, that I should not be allowed to vote for the rest of my life. There's no correlation. Or I didn't pay my speeding ticket, so I can't vote anymore. There's no correlation.
Mhm.
These things are only set up in a scenario where it impacts black and brown people
Mhm.
on average. There are some white
Usually
people who've been
disproportionately.
convicted and lose their rights, but there are far less white people who fit their criteria than black. So let's just agree, if nothing else, every adult person who is a legal citizen that is not incarcerated should have the right to vote.
Mhm.
And then let all voices be heard in our democracy.
Mhm.
Because right now we have a few million people iced out because they owe parking tickets, they've been to jail. Now, had they broken into a polling booth and tried to do something with the vote, that's different. But if you just had a basic robbery, murder, rape, drug dealing, B&E, whatever you're drunk driving, whatever your thing is, if it's not directly connected to voting, it should never affect your ability to vote once you are free and outside of that prison.
Mhm.
So if we can agree on, let's start rebuilding America. Let's get to the foundational principle of America, is that's the democracy. Let's restore rights. Let's just agree that we should restore the rights to all Americans for the right to vote.
Mhm.
Now, if you're an American, why wouldn't you not agree with that? If you're not a racist or you're not an oppressor, why would you not want all Americans to have the right to vote? They might not vote your way, but that's not what this is built on.
Mhm.
So let that be the last message today, that we should be in agreement that all Americans, anybody who's deemed an American, I'm not going to do the documented, undocumented, for those who have documents and are deemed legal citizens. I'm not saying send anybody outside of the country. But when it comes to voting, right now, it's required you become a legal citizen. So I'm going to stick with the law. All legal citizens of this country who are not confined to a cell, who are out walking around in public on probation, on an ankle bracelet, if you can walk to the polls, you should be able to use them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you've served your time, and that's a right that we should afford to everybody. I'll put a link to the Voting Rights Project, which I think is really directly aimed at that, and hopefully people can take action on that at least this week.
Let's get to a place where, okay, we don't agree on this thing, but can we agree on the democracy foundational principles that the founding fathers set up? And I'm going to overlook the fact that blacks and women weren't included in that discussion, or anybody who wasn't a landowner. But we're not going to go that far into it. But let's give the rights back to the people and let the people speak. And if you're against that, ask yourself why. Go, don't do it public. I don't need a Facebook. If you're against people voting, please tell me why. Well, he robbed a bank. Yeah, and what does that have to do with voting? Don't let him in the bank anymore. It's taking his rights away as a U.S. citizen. Now, you denied him, you punished him for his wrong.
He served his time.
He served his time. That's like you leaving your kids out of your will because they didn't clean up their room. I'm kicking you out of my will. Why? You broke a vase and you didn't tell us you did it. Never will you get a dime from me. Your college fund is trash. Why? You didn't wash the car outside like you said you would. Yeah. That's what it is. These are fundamental rights. You should pay for your kid to go to college. He's your kid. We should be allowed to vote.
Yeah. All right, Andre.
All right, my brother.
Important. I appreciate it so much. We'll be back next week. Send us your thoughts, your questions, your comments, and I'll weave them in as possible. And just keep doing what you're doing, Andre. Appreciate it.
We should get a bunch of questions from the audience. If we can get them between now and early next week, we can next week answer questions. We can just get 5 or 6 great questions and drill down on those. I don't need 1,000, even though we might get it. Let's get 5 or 6 great questions and go to it and fill it out.
All right. Andre, thank you. Peace, everybody.
Peace.
All right.